Hi, I'm Clint Kaufman, Production Manager here at Zbroz Racing, and today we're going to show you the basics on how to service and exit shock. Step 1 will be removing your spring stack, and to do that you need to compress the stack and remove the retaining ring at the end of the shaft, and then you're ready to slide the entire spring stack off the shock. And then you'll remove any remaining spring hardware. And then making sure you'll leave this spring retainer clip so that you're not losing the customer's preload setting. And now you're ready to go ahead and wash your shock, and we usually use simple green degreaser and warm water. Now that your customer's shock is clean, now is a great time to write down your customer's shock specs, starting with your eye-to-eye, shaft travel, followed by any compression or rebound adjustments. To get your eye-to-eye, you're going to measure from center of eye to center of eye, followed by then your shaft travel, bottom of seal head to top of spring retainer perch, or any external spacer that would be located directly underneath the bottom out bumper. Then you're going to do your compression adjustment, turning clockwise from current customer spec until fully closed. Followed then the same principle with your rebound, count the clicks till fully closed. And now you're ready to go ahead and remove your shaft assembly. Now you're ready to remove your shaft assembly. You're going to start by depressurizing your shock by pressing down on the Schrader valve at the end of the resi. And once the nitrogen is out, then you're going to take your spanner wrench, hook it into your little holes on the seal head. You're going to break the seal head free. You're going to unthread your shaft. You're going to unthread it, and once it's done, you can slide it up. And you're going to slowly pull up on your shaft. That's what this rag is here for, to catch all the oil that's going to come out. Then a good opportunity, a good way to let it drain is hanging it upside down in a vise. Now you're going to go ahead and remove and dump out any shock fluid in your trough. Reinstall it in the vise. Now you're going to take a pick and remove the retaining clip that holds your resi end in place. Set that aside, and now you can go ahead and pull out your resi end. And there you go. You got that out. Now you'll take your T-handle and you're going to screw that into your IFP. Now you can go ahead and to pull this out, you're going to want to make sure your compression is open. Otherwise it'll be a little bit harder to get out. And go ahead and pull it out. Let it hang to let any excess oil drain off it. And now you're going to want to dump out any remaining oil and let your shock hang upside down just to evacuate the oil. And now you are going to be ready to clean out your shock. Now that we've cleaned the internals of our shock using WD-40, we're now ready to disassemble our shaft. We're going to start by removing the 3/4 inch shaft nut, followed by your complete valve stack and piston. Then take your bumper or your bullet and pull off your seal head, and then followed by your bumper. At this time you will determine whether or not the bumper is reusable. On this particular shock, it is not. You will then go ahead and remove all seals from your seal head along with the seal from your internal floating piston, and to clean that all you will need to do is use a rag and wipe it clean. Once you've removed all seals from your seal head, now you'll take it and using the same simple green and a toothbrush, you can clean it and cycle it out and then rinse it out with hot water, and then you will blow it out with compressed air so that it is dry. And now you're ready to reassemble these parts. Now that we've gone ahead and installed new seals in our seal head, you'll want to take a slight amount of lithium grease and just coat the inner DU bushing. You're going to want to reinstall your new O-ring on your resi end, along with your IFP, or internal floating piston. And once you get that O-ring in place, you're going to want to take and grease that O-ring with some lithium grease. We are now ready to install these parts back on the shaft. You're going to want to take a slight amount of lithium grease, coat the shaft, and then you're going to slide your bumper on, followed by your seal head. And you're going to want to go fast to get over that lip. You're going to take any remaining grease and just coat the shaft and slide the seal head up a few times to lube those O-rings really good. Go ahead and wipe my hands. Now you can go ahead and install your valving stack onto the end of the shaft. And at this time you would install before you put on your valving stack, you would want to make sure that if it had an internal spacer, that you put that in the correct order. Now, you put on your valving nut, and you're going to go ahead and torque that 3/4 inch nut to 25 foot-pounds. And now you're ready to begin the bleeding up process. We're now ready to go ahead and bleed up our shock. We're going to make sure that we're using our Zbroz Racing Shock fluid, the desired weight for the application in which we're servicing. I'm going to start by making sure my compression is open. I'm going to put my hand over the end of the resi. I'm going to pour my shock fluid into the body, pouring the fluid till it reaches the bottom of the threads inside the body. I'm going to let my hand off the body and slowly closing my compression until the oil stops at the top of my valving nut on my high-speed compression piston. Now that our oil is to the top of the valving nut, we're going to go ahead and install our bleeder piston. We're going to compress the oil, and we're going to push any air bubbles that are trapped on the high-speed piston. We're going to open up our compression. We're going to cycle the oil till it's to the top of the resi. Once that is done, we're going to close off our compression adjuster. We're going to let any air bubbles rise to the surface. Once you're confident all air bubbles have evacuated the resi, then we'll go ahead and pull up on our bleeder piston, bringing the oil level back down to the top of your valving nut. We're going to go ahead and recompress it with the compression closed. Go ahead and open it again another 5 clicks or so. Cycle the oil to the top of the resi. Close off your compression. Let any air bubbles travel to the surface again. We're going to pull this back down till the oil is back down to the top of the valving nut. Recompress. Open 5 clicks. And now this time we're going to get the oil to just inside the retaining clip gland. And then we're going to go ahead and close off our compression. We're going to let any air bubbles reach the surface. And now we are ready to install our internal floating piston. Now for an XO application, the steps are pretty similar, except for since you do not have a compression adjuster, instead of using the bleeder piston, you will just use your hand tapping the top of the body and cycling the oil. If you tap fast enough, you should be able to get the oil to reach the top of the resi, and then you're going to hold your hand there until all bubbles evacuate. Then you're going to take your hand away, let the oil cycle back through until it equalizes, and then you can go ahead and tap again the body. And what you're doing is you're just allowing those air bubbles to cycle through the system. After you do that 2 or 3 times, then you're going to go ahead and tap the top of your body again until your oil reaches the center of that retaining clip gland. And then now you're going to have to use your hand to hold pressure to keep that oil high, so that now you can go ahead and install your internal floating piston. Now we're ready to go ahead and install our IFP. So we'll take that and making sure our oil is to the top of the resi. We're going to bring this IFP in on an angle, and we're going to slowly install it, pushing out excess oil, and that will ensure that there's no air bubbles. Go ahead and slowly press that in until it pops into that retaining ring groove, and then you can let go. I'll go ahead now and set my compression adjustment to the customer spec, which happened to be 8 out. So I'll back it out 1 turn until it reaches the first click, and then I'll count 8 out. Now that I'm 8 out, now it's time to install my piston band. And go ahead, and this would be a good time to go ahead and wipe it clean with a rag. Install it in the groove, holding the two ends together. Then I'll go ahead and compress it into my shock. I can go ahead now and make sure that's topped out on the valving nut. Go ahead and remove your bleeder piston. Set that aside. Take out your T-handle. Now you'll take any of this excess grease that was on your O-ring, and you're just going to want to coat the inside of your resi, and that will just help lubricate everything. Go ahead now, and you're going to wipe the end of your resi with your rag. You're going to go ahead and make sure you get inside that snap ring groove. Get it all nice and clean. And once you're confident it's clean, you'll go ahead and grab your resi end, install that till it pops into place. Then you'll take your snap ring, and I like to wipe any dirt and excess grease or anything that's on it, get it nice and clean. I'll go ahead and snap it into place. Now I'll go ahead, and in this point in time, I'll go ahead and charge my shock. I will take my rag then, install it now in my bodies. I want to make sure I wipe off my piston band as well for the dampening piston. Bring this upside down. Again, take both ends, hold it, and just slowly install it into the bore. And once you get the holes down below the surface, then you can just give it a little tap, and you'll evacuate any air that is trapped on the back side of the piston. And at this point, then I'll go ahead and put that shaft all the way down. And I like to use these clothespins because that'll hold my shaft assembly up during the bleeding process. See, then it'll hold it there. So now I'll go ahead and top off my oil when my shaft assembly is all the way down. I'll top off my oil to just below the top of the body. We'll let any air evacuate out of the system and rise to the surface. I'll go ahead and pull it up, making sure to never let my bleed holes outside of the oil. We want to keep oil covering those holes so that you know you're not sucking in any air. Now we'll go ahead and tap the shaft in, and what I'm doing here is I'm tapping the end of the shaft, and what that's doing is you're pushing down. That's going to open up the valving and let any air that's trapped on the back side of your piston, it's going to open up the valving, it's going to let the air escape, and then it's going to rise to the surface. So now we'll let those air bubbles rise to the top. I'll slide my clothespin down and let any air bubbles that are in here rise to the top. And I'll tap. And you'll do this procedure 2-3 times or until you're confident that there is no more air. I'm confident there's no more air. So now I'll pull up my shaft as high as I can, making sure that my bleed holes stay below the surface of the oil. Again, I will top off my oil to just below the top of the body. I'll go ahead and pull it up again as high as I can. Maybe top it off just a little bit more, because ultimately you want to make sure there's no air in the system. So now I've got my shaft as high as I can get it, and as much oil as I can get into the end of the shaft or into the body. I'll hold my shaft over. Now I'm going to slide my seal head down till it touches the body. Now I'm going to center my shaft assembly in the bore and slowly install my seal head into the bore. And as you can see, it's pushing out oil and any trapped air that's on the underside of the seal head. And once I get that all the way topped out to where the threads are touching each other, I'll go ahead and I can pull up on my shaft and make sure that my shaft is fully topped out. So now I'll back my seal head counterclockwise until I feel the threads back into their proper thread engagement. And then I'll go ahead, do about a quarter of a turn. Now I'll go ahead and thread in my seal head till the O-ring touches the body, and that's going to push out any excess oil. I'll let that sit until my shaft is back to loose, and that way I know that my IFP is fully topped out and that I have the most amount of oil in the system. So now I'll go ahead and let out the nitrogen pressure. I'll go and install the seal head, and I like to back the seal head out a few times as I'm threading it in, and that will help the O-ring be relaxed. I've topped out my seal head, so now I'll take my spanner wrench, retighten my seal head. I'll take my rag, wipe the excess oil off the body, dispose of my rag. Now I'm ready to go ahead and set my nitrogen pressure and reinstall my spring setup. Now it's time to charge up our shock. We're going to go ahead, install the nitrogen. We're going to take our pressure gauge, and this particular shock is going to take 12 bar of pressure. Get this in place. So now we're going to go ahead and set our pressure. With that, reinstall our cap. We've already set our compression adjustment, so now we'll set our rebound. And this particular shock was at 23 clicks out.
What's your name?
Now it's a good time to take and compress your shock, making sure it returns fully, that you hear no air squish. I didn't hear it on this one, so this one's ready to go. We can now go ahead and reinstall our spring stack, starting with any spacer, our spring retainer. Go ahead and install our freshly cleaned spring stack, retainer. Reinstall the clip. There we go. Now we can remove the shock. And then this is where, if you recall, I'm measuring our settings. This is where you would go ahead and remeasure so that you make sure you returned all parts in the shock to their original place. So you'll measure your eye to eye. You would measure your shaft travel if needs be. Install your reducers, zip time, and you've now serviced an exit shock.